like I said before, it gets too expensive and
It does.
I have to start eating at home more.
Welcome to WatchMojo, and today we're counting down 50 normal-looking people, places, and things that ended up having disturbing, and in some cases, downright terrifying backstories.
Right now, I don't even want to just throw anything out there. I hope that she's somewhere safe right now.
The dating game killer. Serial killer Rodney Alcala is one of the most depraved murderers in American history. He maliciously toyed with his victims, assaulted and even killed some of them. There were at least 8 victims of his crimes, although some estimates place the toll as high as 130.
Between takes, he might find him skydiving or motorcycling. Please welcome Rodney Alcala. Rod, welcome.
In 1978, Alcala appeared on the game show The Dating Game and won a date with Bachelorette Cheryl Bradshaw.
Well, I like bananas, so I'll take one.
However, she ultimately declined to go on the date and referred to Alcala as creepy. Another contestant called him a very strange guy. At this point, Alcala had already murdered numerous people and would go on to kill again. He died in 2021 while serving life in California State Prison, Corcoran.
It is chilling to realize that this iconic show, celebrating love and romance, would unknowingly feature a remorseless killer.
Lightning strike. While the numbers vary, the odds of getting struck by lightning are relatively slim. That doesn't mean you shouldn't take lightning safety seriously, though. This photo of 18-year-old Michael McQuilkin and his 12-year-old brother Sean has served as a cautionary tale ever since it was taken in 1975. Posing together at Morro Rock, the brothers were goofing around with their hair standing on end. Their static hair and those storm clouds in the background were more foreboding than either realized, as lightning struck them shortly after their sister took the picture. Another hiker died, and while the brothers survived, Sean was left with third-degree burns and took his own life in 1989. Michael continues to spread awareness about the dangers and warning signs of lightning. Christopher McCandless. With a grin across his face, the man in this picture appears to be waving hello, but he was actually waving goodbye. This bearded explorer is Christopher McCandless, the subject of the 2007 biopic Into the Wild.
Is there anybody here?
Leaving his old life behind, McCandless decided to fend for himself in Mother Nature's backyard, eventually seeking refuge in an abandoned Fairbanks Bus 142. In August 1992, the 24-year-old McCandless died at Stampede Trail, Alaska, most likely due to starvation. Based on the last self-photo he took, it's evident McCandless knew his days were numbered. While it's hard to make out, the paper McCandless is holding is his farewell message, reading, quote, "I have had a happy life and thank the Lord. Goodbye, and may God bless all." David A. Johnston. While not a household name, David A. Johnston was a revered volcanologist who, along with the United States Geological Survey, helped save thousands of people through his on-site work. Tragically, Johnston lost his own life in the process. All seems well in this photo, as Johnston sits in a chair outside looking into the camera. Little did anyone know that within the next 13 hours, Johnston would perish in the 1980 eruption of Mount St. Helens. The eruption, preceded by seismic activity, was first reported by Johnston, who radioed the message, quote, "Vancouver, Vancouver, this is it." Within the next seconds, the signal went out and Johnston was never heard from again.
So I guess I had the realization right away that this was some kind of a tragedy. And on the one hand, it was this huge, exciting, and interesting magmatic eruption, and on the other hand, I was pretty certain that something terrible had happened to Dave.
While his remains were never found, it's believed that Johnston died at Coldwater 2, a post that wasn't as safe as anticipated.
I think one of the things to put in perspective is that 234 square miles of that area of Washington were devastated by that blast. So 5.7 miles?
Yeah.
That was within that devastation zone, the blast zone.
Mark Jackson's basketball card. For die-hard sports fans, you'll recognize the player on this basketball card as Mark Jackson, who started his NBA career with the New York Knicks and later coached the Golden State Warriors. At first glance, this card would likely blend in with the rest of your collection. Take a closer look at the lower left-hand corner, though. You see those two young fans sitting in the front row? They are Lyle and Eric Menendez, two wealthy brothers who took the lives of their allegedly abusive parents on August 20th, 1989.
The brothers who were thought to have it all, at times acting out, even going as far as robbing houses until they were caught.
The brothers weren't arrested for these crimes until March 8, 1990, and in between that time, they spent an extravagant amount of money.
So at the time, nothing seemed suspicious to you about them?
No. But soon detectives shifted their focus.
The brothers were out there spending money like it was water.
It appears that some of that fortune went towards Knicks tickets before their apprehension. The Joseph James DeAngelo tape. Nicknamed the Golden State Killer, Joseph DeAngelo's spree lasted from 1973 to 1986, and he successfully eluded police capture. He was also known to make obscene phone calls to his victims, like in Black Christmas. The FBI released one of these recorded calls in 2018, which depicted DeAngelo breathing heavily into the phone and using crude and terrifying language against his victim. This is not the type of call you'd want to receive in the middle of the night. It wasn't until 2018 that DeAngelo was arrested and charged, and he was sentenced to life in prison in August 2020 when he was nearly 75 years old. The Chernobyl Phone Call.
We need water moving through the cord. That is all that matters.
There is no core. It exploded.
Anyone who's watched HBO's Chernobyl has heard the nightmare-inducing phone call that was placed shortly after the famous explosion. It starts with a very haunting beeping sound before panicked voices begin speaking to each other. The audio is obviously not in English, but the fear and anxiety in the voices are palpable. The call reportedly consists of an emergency service worker inquiring about the explosion before phoning the dispatchers and ordering them to respond. Many of these firefighters would die horrible deaths owing to the fatal amounts of radiation at the scene. It's impossible to tell how many people died in the tragedy, but it remains the world's worst nuclear disaster. Operation Wandering Soul. By all accounts, the Vietnam War was a never-ending nightmare for both sides.
Sing it loud. Into the Romeo Foxtrot, shall we dance?
The Viet Cong were subjected to psychological warfare by the United States Army, who broadcast the so-called Operation Wandering Soul from helicopters and bases. This recording is full of creepy sounds, including echoey reverb effects and ghostly vocals that were intended to represent the damned souls of the dead. The tape preyed on Vietnamese ritual, as it said that the unburied dead wander the earth in pain and frustration, hence Operation Wandering Soul. Just imagine hearing this in the pitch-black jungle late at night. Ayano Tokumasu. Remember that scene in Superman 2 where a little boy falls over the rail at Niagara Falls? Well, that sort of thing happens more often than you think, but Superman sadly isn't around to save the day. On the surface, there doesn't seem to be anything particularly special about this photo, which sees several people gathering at Niagara River. The woman in the red sweater is Ayano Tokumasu, an exchange student from Japan. If you think standing on that pillar seems kind of dangerous, you'd be right. Not long after the photo was taken, she lost her balance and fell over the edge, ultimately going down Horseshoe Falls. Tokumasu was swept from the river's Canadian side to its American side, where her lifeless body was discovered.
People just go too far. You know, I don't blame anything on the park. I just think people wanted to get that extra edge, get closer. And unfortunately, things happen.
Bear photographer. There are countless photos of bears out there, and this one doesn't look much different from all the rest. Since the picture was taken from a distance and the bear isn't charging, the photographer seemingly isn't in any immediate danger. After Darsh Patel snapped this pic using his phone, however, the bear started to follow him and his friends. The group split up as the bear began to close in on them, ultimately pursuing Patel. His phone was eventually found with animal teeth marks, while Patel's body was discovered at a nearby ravine.
A scenic Sunday afternoon ended in horror when 5 hikers crossed paths with a 300-pound black bear that looked similar to this one.
The bear was still hanging around the 22-year-old's fatally mauled remains, and the authorities took the wild animal out.
We believe this bear was about 4 years old. It was not a tagged bear, meaning it had no history with the DEP. There was no research done on this bear that we know of. It had no previous incidents of aggression that would have called it to our attention.
This photo op came at a steep price for Patel and the bear. Dutch girls of Panama. Scrolling through Instagram, chances are you'll stumble across a number of pleasant photos like these. Standing against a colorful backdrop with green hills and blue skies, 22-year-old Lisana Froon appears to have a lovely day ahead of her. Froon was on vacation with 21-year-old Chris Kramers, a fellow Dutch student seen in another photo at the same spot. The two set out for a hike in Panama on April 1, 2014 when these pics were taken. This was also the day that Froon and Kramers disappeared, resulting in a grueling search. 10 weeks down the line, Froon's backpack was uncovered with her camera inside. Froon and Kramers' remains were eventually found scattered across the jungle, with the cause of death still up for debate. The Midlothian Church murder suspect. This security footage from Creekside Church in Midlothian, Texas, shows a person in tactical gear patrolling the halls and opening various doors. Without knowing the story, this 2016 footage comes across as relatively harmless. It's a little weird seeing a lone person in full tactical gear inside an empty church, but the police search and examine buildings all the time. This person was not examining, however. They were hunting. Inside the church was fitness instructor Missy Beavers, and she was murdered, with the evidence pointing to the person in the video. Unfortunately, nothing else is known about the crime. The suspect and their motivation for killing Beavers remain a mystery.
2 Tahitian women. Paul Gauguin.
Paul Gauguin's life was the stuff of romantic fiction.
Sometimes the darker parts of artist biographies are glossed over in favor of artistic praise. Paul Gauguin produced a large number of paintings during his time in Tahiti that featured bright colors, stunning vivid landscapes, alluring locals, and what the artist called a primitive paradise.
Tahiti had long taken root as an earthly paradise in the European imagination.
However, the women depicted in the paintings were not always simply Gauguin's muses, they were also his mistresses. In his time in Tahiti, Gauguin infected a large female population with syphilis. He named his home the House of Pleasure, took strolls with an erect penis-handled walking stick, had a second-floor room plastered with lewd photographs, and so on. This makes us look at the women in paintings such as 2 Tahitian women a little differently.
Radar. The world wars in the early 20th century were also an arms race to see who could create the next deadly weapon. One idea that fascinated scientists and military leaders alike was the concept of a death ray.
The British government feared an aerial invasion and wanted a death ray that could knock German planes out of the sky.
British scientists hoped to discover a way to use radio waves to kill foes at a distance. However, the power requirements were enormous. Ultimately, they hit on the idea of using the echoes of radio waves to detect incoming airplanes in the sky, which was arguably even better, tactically speaking.
During the Battle of Britain, towers like Stenigott sent radio pulses out into the sky and measured the echoes back to work out the direction that German raids were approaching from.
While many nations came up with the idea independently, Britain, with the help from American factories, figured it out first.
Teams from Germany, Japan and the US were all working on their own radar systems, but the UK's was the most advanced.
Thus, radar was born.
Judith slaying Holofernes, Artemisia Gentileschi. Artemisia Gentileschi was an Italian Baroque painter and a highly talented artist influenced primarily by Caravaggio.
The 17th century art world simply wasn't ready for her. Not only was she a woman, but she was one who favored gory biblical scenes over demure portraits and still lives.
The majority of her works feature images from myth and religion. Judith slaying Holofernes depicts the biblical story of Judith, who infiltrated the Assyrian army during the war with Palestine in order to take the life of General Holofernes.
The story is usually interpreted that she seduces the general, but he gets drunk and falls asleep, and then she takes his sword and beheads him. And that's the moment that we're seeing here.
The painting is often seen as a sort of self-portrait, as Artemisia was sexually assaulted by family friend and painter Agostino Tassi, after which she threatened him with a knife for taking her honor. A closer look at the painting reveals that Judith wears a bracelet featuring the goddess Artemis, who guarded her virginity diligently and violently retaliated against anyone who threatened it.
And it looks to me like she's rolled up her sleeves in order to do this. The naturalism is so palpable here. And of course, that is the heart of Baroque art.
Ammonia fertilizer. Fertilizer is essential in crop growing, and natural sources can often lack the nitrogen that leads to efficient crop yields. Enter Fritz Haber and Karl Bosch. These two German scientists created the Haber-Bosch method, which creates ammonia from nitrogen in the atmosphere.
Without this reaction, farmers would be capable of producing enough food for only 4 billion people. Our current population is just over 7 billion people. So without the Haber process, over 3 billion people would be without food.
Most of the world's annual food production comes as a result of fertilizer created with this process, and it's likely that the world couldn't support as many people as it does today without it. However, the two of them also worked on weapons development during the First World War.
Most believe he was far more interested in helping Germany make more explosives. Because while ammonia can be made to produce fertilizer, it can also be easily converted into nitric acid, a very important ingredient for explosives.
With Haber being considered the father of chemical warfare due to his work on chlorine gas. Something to think about the next time you're doing yard work.
Haber would create even deadlier gases, combining chlorine with phosgene, which blocks metabolic processes and leads to pulmonary edema, death by fluid accumulation in the lungs.
The Ghent altarpiece, Hubert and Jan van Eyck.
Throughout 6 centuries, the Ghent altarpiece has been burned, forged, and raided in 3 different wars. It is, in fact, the world's most stolen artwork.
The Ghent altarpiece was commissioned by Ghent, Belgium's Mayor Judocus Veit and his wife Lisbeth in the 1420s, and completed by 1432. It is a 12-piece installment depicting religious figures, scenes, and symbols.
It's one of the most influential artworks ever made. When Jan van Eyck completed it in Ghent in 1432, it was immediately deemed the best painting in Europe.
The piece has a volatile history. In the 16th century, the Great Iconoclasm, or Bildungssturm, a movement to destroy religious iconography, would have seen the destruction of the altarpiece had it not been for rabid clergymen hiding it. In 1781, Roman Emperor Joseph II viewed the piece and declared the nudity of Adam and Eve to be offensive, causing those panels to be removed. It was also historically dismantled and separated, cut in half, narrowly survived a fire, was bricked into a wall, stolen, nearly blown up. It is currently in restoration.
It's a miracle that it still exists, but otherwise you only see texts on what has happened with it.
Vibrators. Let's all try to be mature about this, okay?
One of the first 5 electric gadgets, besides the sewing machine, fan, toaster, and tea kettle, was a plug-in sexual stimulator.
Vibrators are sex toys, yes, but they weren't originally used with sex in mind, explicitly anyway. The electric vibrator was invented in the 19th century and used to relieve various maladies, including pain relief, tumors, and hysteria.
The medical establishment has offered hysterical women a veritable smorgasbord of treatments. Warm baths, ice baths, water jets, mesmerization, horseback riding even. But I favor a more direct approach.
The last of these was most pertinent to vibrators' eventual purpose, as it was essentially medical professionals misunderstanding women experiencing frustration.
Like a lot of manual tasks that are difficult and possibly onerous, it was mechanized.
And so was born the vibrator.
And the fact that the relief of said frustration was considered a medical procedure at the time is just all kinds of disturbing. GPS. Global Positioning System, or GPS, is a satellite system that can track signals all over the globe.
These satellites are continuously beaming data down to us on Earth, which is in turn received by devices such as your phone or navigational units in your cars, allowing you to see where you are on the planet.
It's also owned and operated by the United States military. While some may find this disturbing, what's arguably more upsetting is why the US military began allowing the use of it by almost anyone. In 1983, Korean Airlines Flight 007 was flying from New York to Seoul via Alaska. A navigation error led to the plane flying into Soviet airspace, and the civilian craft was shot down.
The United States reacts with revulsion to this attack.
loss of life appears to be heavy. We can see no excuse whatsoever for this appalling act.
While the tragic loss of life was awful and led to a rise in tensions between the two superpowers, President Ronald Reagan decided to make GPS available on a global scale to prevent similar avoidable losses of private aircraft.
Among the rest of us, there is one protective measure, an international radio wavelength on which pilots can communicate with planes of other nations if they are in trouble or lost.
The Charnel House, Pablo Picasso. In 1937, Picasso painted Guernica, a depiction of the bombing aftermath of a small village during the Spanish Civil War. It's an aggressive vision of chaos and a poignant anti-war statement.
The style offers a profoundly overwhelming view of violence, destruction, and casualties. Multiple perspectives only compound the horror on display.
Around 1944, the artist painted something of a sequel to Guernica in Charnel House. Picasso was said to be apolitical and that he did not concern himself with political affairs. However, the Civil War changed that, and his reaction is clear in the two pieces. Charnel House depicts a Republican family who was murdered in their house during World War II, turning, according to Picasso, their family home into a charnel house, meaning a storage vault for bodies. Though the piece may initially not look striking, proper observation reveals the grotesque nature of the subject matter within.
Picasso's work remains a searing reminder of the true casualties of violence.
Bicycles. What do climate change, a volcano, and dead horses have to do with the creation of the bicycle? Everything. 1816 was the year without a summer. It was so called because a massive volcanic eruption in Indonesia the previous year coated the world in ash and clouds for nearly a year.
In Europe, China, India, and North America, 1816 was a year of endless winter. Snow fell in July, rivers froze in August, and crops failed on a gigantic scale.
This led people to slaughtering their horses for food when crops could not grow. And with horses being the primary mode of transport, the inventor Baron von Drais was inspired the following year to invent the first hobby horse, or velocipede, known today as a bicycle.
The machine produced by Baron von Drais had two wheels of the same size, handlebars and a brake, so much of what we know from a modern bike.
While cycling didn't catch on immediately, his invention proved that a dark year for the world could lead to good things.
By around 1900, the bicycle was a mode of transport for all. What started out as a plaything for the nobility was now mobilizing the masses.
Portrait with bandaged ear, Vincent van Gogh. Van Gogh was plagued with mental health issues throughout his life, and this self-portrait represents one of his most infamous fits.
A cataclysmic breakdown, culminating in an act of bloody self-mutilation.
When he was roommates with fellow painter Paul Gauguin, the two got into an argument, and Van Gogh had a mental seizure and threatened his fellow artist with a razor. Unfortunately, he only injured himself with said razor, slicing off a piece of his own left ear, which he then presented as a gift to a local lady of the night.
She fainted at the sight of it, while Vincent disappeared into the night and then returned home.
He claims to have no recollection of the episode. Van Gogh painted many self-portraits, but the couple featuring the bandaged ear on the right side in paintings due to using a mirror while painting symbolizes the darker psychological side of a troubled man, whether intentional or not. Treadmills. Treadmills have been around for thousands of years in some form or another. However, while their use as a man or animal power source for mills is well documented, fewer people know about their connection to prisons.
In the 1800s, treadmills were created to punish English prisoners.
Like the treadmills connected to farms or actual mills, penal treadmills did power devices, but they were also a form of punishment for prisoners sentenced to hard labor. Most often seen in England, these torturous machines tormented prisoners in 6-hour shifts.
Well, it turns out prison treadmills had a problem. They were deadly. Prisoners were expected to treadmill for at least 6 hours a day. That meant prisoners logged over 10,000 feet, the equivalent of climbing the CN Tower over 5 times every day. This caused prisoners' bodies to break down.
Naturally, they were eventually abolished, but they were still used for most of the 19th century. Really puts your workout into perspective, doesn't it?
When the jogging craze hit the US in the 1970s, the treadmill was thrust back into the limelight as an easy and convenient way to improve aerobic fitness.
Black triptychs, Francis Bacon. Francis Bacon was, like some aforementioned artists, careful not to adhere meaning or stories to any of his works.
With the record of the image comes the mood, because you can't make an image without it creating a mood. A person or a thing, either a portrait or a figure.
He did, however, admit to narrative in his Black Triptychs, particularly Triptych August 1972 and Triptych May to June 1973. Bacon had a romantic relationship with George Dyer, a man of unfortunate upbringing.
They became inseparable. Dyer was not sophisticated, but went to every single exhibition that Bacon had, would travel regularly to Paris.
Dyer became his artistic model and lover in the 1960s, though the relationship was ill-fated, mostly due to Dyer's alcoholism. Dyer took his own life in an adjacent connected hotel room in 1971, while Bacon was at the opening of his art retrospective. The Black Triptychs depict the way in which Dyer was found, one from the perspective of Dyer's room, one from Bacon's side. The paintings are admittedly a catharsis for Bacon's emotional grief.
The Trinity Test. The first time a nuclear bomb was ever detonated was on July 16, 1945 in New Mexico. Dubbed the Trinity Test, the event was carried out by the U.S. as part of the Manhattan Project, which sought to develop the first nuclear weapons. The videotaped recording of this test showcased the terrifying power of the nuclear bomb. Once detonated, the explosion produced a blinding flash followed by a massive mushroom cloud that reached over 7 miles in height. The project was initiated due to fears that the Nazis might develop nuclear weapons first, and this test became a precursor to the bombings of Japanese cities Hiroshima and Nagasaki, which left an estimated 129,000 to 226,000 dead.
I realize the tragic significance of the atomic bomb. Having found the atomic bomb, we have used it.
Rajay Sharif Black's haunting Facebook Live. On December 11, 2021, 44-year-old Rajay Sharif Black went on Facebook to confess to a horrendous crime.
I would be doing this, but I gotta make it quick.
The session starts off pretty normal, with Black talking about the strained relationship with his ex-wife and the bitter custody battle they had been engaged in.
Online records in Howard County Circuit Court show a hearing in the custody case slated for next month, and nearly 4 years of accusations lodged across dozens and dozens of filings.
He then reveals that he had just taken the life of his ex-girlfriend and was about to do the same to his former wife, Wendy, and then himself. According to reports, Black had mental health issues and was alleged to have been violent towards Wendy during their marriage. The divorced couple were found dead by law enforcement shortly after. Police also found their kids alive and well inside Black's car parked outside the house.
Police Commissioner Michael Harrison and Mayor Brandon Scott were at the Federal Hills scene today. They both condemned what happened and said disputes like these should never end in violence.
The murder of Elizabeth Barraza. Early in the morning of January 25, 2019, Elizabeth Barraza was standing in the driveway outside her Tomball, Texas home when she was murdered in cold blood.
But investigators have found no reason why someone would want to kill the popular young woman.
I don't think that the person that shot her is the one that wanted her dead.
Barraza was setting up for an impromptu garage sale in order to fund an anniversary trip for her and her husband. Moments after her husband had driven out to work, a neighbor's doorbell camera showed an unknown individual walk up to Barraza and shoot her.
Surveillance video captures a Nissan Frontier four-door truck pull up. A person wearing go-go boots, a muumuu dress, and a wig walks up to Barraza. After she says good morning, the person fires 4 shots.
The killer then ran back to their car and sped off. Police believe that the same car returned to the scene later, seemingly to ensure their mission was accomplished. Even with a sizable reward put out by the Barraza family, her killer still remains on the loose.
There is a $50,000 reward at Crime Stoppers, and that's money this family has helped raise. They told us tonight they want to see this reward paid out.
Long Island Missing Persons Shrine. A regular hike in the woods took an extremely disturbing turn for one New York man. While walking through the Berkeley-Jackson County Park, James Rankin stumbled upon what could easily pass for a horror movie scene.
What the is going on in here?
In what appeared to be a rudimentary camp, someone had hung up several missing person posters of real-life cases. The hiker made a video of this strange sight, which went viral on Facebook.
These are all different fucking people, and they're all just...
Rankin also forwarded his findings to the police, who investigated the case and reportedly concluded that they were just decorations for a holiday party. But with the decorations having been up long before Halloween, Rankin, as well as many online spectators, believe there could be a more sinister agenda at play.
You know, what's this one? Tim... Hamilton Police,
2013.
Mr. Fritz the Doll. Dolls can either be fun toys for kids to play with or really creepy creations that can give you nightmares. This one definitely falls into the latter category, known as Mr. Fritz the Doll. This figure was filmed in the home of its owner after they'd noticed some strange occurrences. In the clip, the doll can reportedly be seen blinking and moving its mouth. Also, the cabinet in which it sits opens and closes seemingly without any aid. While the video is creepy on its own, the doll's unsettling history makes it even worse. Apparently, Mr. Fritz was made by an American prisoner at a Nazi camp during World War II. Who knows what despicable things its eyes have seen? Chelino Sanchez's death note. After years of selling his music out of his trunk, Chelino Sanchez rose to become the voice of narco corrido music.
A ti, mi grandota, te brindo mi canto, a ti te dedico mi humilde canción.
Sanchez had a particularly violent life, which culminated in his tragic murder on May 16, 1992. The night before, Sanchez performed to a packed audience at the Salón Bugambilias in Culiacán, Mexico. During his set, which was recorded on tape, someone handed the singer a mysterious note, widely believed to have contained a death threat. In the video, Sanchez reads the note and is immediately uneasy. He, however, crumples it and proceeds with his show. Hours later, Sanchez was abducted by a group of armed men claiming to be police officers. His body was found by an irrigation canal the next morning.
A sinister marriage announcement. When Charlie Carver's Facebook page announced his marriage to Kayla Brown, his girlfriend, family and friends were more worried than excited. The day before, both Carver and Brown had mysteriously disappeared, and the fact that Brown had left her dog alone and unattended was suspicious. As days passed, several more Facebook posts appeared, some disturbing, such as news stories about the missing couple and violent messages. Police were able to track the location of Carver's and Brown's cell phones, which had ended up near the property of real estate broker Todd Kohlhepp. There they found Brown tied up in a crate and Carver's body.
I think he knew immediately that he messed up.
Kohlhepp had abducted them both, murdered Carver, and posted the Facebook messages in Carver's name.
This is horrible. I mean, this was a son, a brother, a friend.
Appearing innocent isn't enough. When Alan Ruby posted a picture of himself relaxing in a hotel with college roommates, probably no one who saw it guessed that his parents and sister were dead at home. The housekeeper found them the next morning. They had all been shot.
That I was with him, just alone in his room, less than 24 hours after he shot his family. And that I could tell nothing was wrong, that he was completely normal.
In spite of the post on social media, which might have been an attempt to create an alibi, suspicion fell on Ruby pretty quickly. The young college student was a compulsive and extravagant spender, so desperate for money that he had previously stolen his grandmother's credit card. As it turned out, Ruby had murdered his 3 family members in cold blood, believing he would then inherit their money. Posting while flying. Amritpal Singh was an amateur pilot who liked to post pictures from the air to social media. While admiring his lovely photos, friends and family members probably never stopped to think about the possible danger to Singh himself. But sadly, it eventually caught up with him.
Units be advised, the parties at Front Range Airport are on their way over to the plane now. They can see it. It is down in a field at this time.
In May of 2014, Singh's plane crashed not far from the Front Range Airport in Colorado. He and his passenger, a friend, were killed in the crash.
The NTSB report stated those in the plane were also using the camera's flash function in the night.
Evidence showed that both of them had been taking pictures and selfies with their phones. Authorities believe that the flashes temporarily blinded Singh, making him lose control of the plane.
All we know is they were flying around just in the area, and deputies report that there was heavy fog in this area this morning.
Those old selfies feel different in retrospect. At the Red Lake. In 2017, when travel vlogger Sarah Funk visited the Mitsero Red Lake in Cyprus, she and her partner probably thought the place was creepy enough. A mining company excavated there long ago, then abandoned the site, leaving an acidic crater that fills with red water every winter. Funk posted a video on YouTube of herself at the lake with what appeared to be an old suitcase floating in the water nearby. 2 years later, a Cypriot army captain confessed to murdering several people. putting their bodies in suitcases and throwing them into the Red Lake.
A travel case was pulled from the lake, containing the body of a woman and a block of cement.
So chances are, without realizing it, Funk was near one that day in 2017, off the road. Based on her social media posts, Gabby Petito's travels across the United States with her boyfriend Brian Laundrie seemed idyllic. An aspiring influencer, she documented them hiking, camping, and having fun on the beach. However, all was not as it seemed. Witnesses told police that they saw an altercation between the couple. Police found Petito distraught. About a month later, Laundrie returned to Florida in their van, alone.
The Laundrie family acted with indecency. They acted not as humans. This girl was part of their family.
Not long after, Petito's body was discovered in a national park in Wyoming. Laundrie, the prime suspect, was found dead in a swamp sometime later. He had taken his own life, and in his notebook, he had admitted to killing Petito. Dating turned deadly. When Sydney Loof didn't come to work one day in November of 2017, concerned friends and family contacted the police. Investigators saw that her last post to social media had been a selfie with the caption, "Ready for my date." She had been in contact with a woman on Tinder named Audrey. They also found that her phone had pinged at an apartment near Lincoln, Nebraska. However, the apartment's residents, Bailey Boswell and Aubrey Trail, had disappeared. The couple posted videos on social media claiming they didn't know what happened to Loof, but had fled because the police were after them. After Loof's remains were discovered not long afterward, both were convicted of first-degree murder.
Trail said he panicked and they disposed of Loof's body in the rural Clay County field when it was light out.
A scam, an escape, and a murder. Our top pick is one of the most disturbing stories in social media history.
So did you kill your mom?
No, sir.
Did you help?
No, sir.
Dee Dee Blanchard had a joint Facebook account with her daughter, Gypsy Rose, where she would post asking for donations. Rose was apparently suffering from leukemia, muscular dystrophy, and other ailments.
I'm going to Children's Mercy Hospital to see my dentist.
As it turned out, however, Dee Dee had been lying to doctors and friends for years. Rose had no serious medical conditions and had been confined to the house and forbidden to speak to anyone. When Rose was 20, she met a sympathetic young man online, and they hatched a plan to murder her mother. Once it was done, Rose announced the fact on their Facebook page. Although Rose is now in prison, she says she feels freer than before.
The Boston Marathon bomber buys milk. Security footage inside a Boston area Whole Foods shows a man dressed in black entering, buying a carton of milk, and leaving without incident. Nothing at all out of the ordinary here. He was even buying the milk for his 2-year-old niece. Except this man was an extremist, and his previous actions of placing pressure cooker bombs close to the finish line of the Boston Marathon had just killed 3 people and horrifically injured another 264. In fact, the time between detonation and milk buying was less than half an hour. Perpetrator Dzhokhar Tsarnaev became the target of a massive manhunt, during which his fellow perpetrator and brother Tamerlan died. Dzhokhar was found 4 days after the bombing. He is currently incarcerated at Supermax Prison ADX Florence. Travis Alexander. Travis Alexander was 30 when this photo was taken of him in the shower. The person behind the camera was Jodi Arias, with whom Alexander had a shaky romantic relationship. This was the last photo ever taken of Alexander alive, as his friends found his body in the shower a few days later. It was only a matter of time until the authorities connected the dots and arrested his ex-girlfriend. Arias constantly changed her story, originally pleading innocence, later claiming that 2 intruders broke in, and ultimately testifying that she killed Alexander in self-defense.
Why?
The simple answer is that he attacked me, and I defended myself.
In the end, Arias was deemed guilty of first-degree murder, receiving a life sentence.
We, the jury, duly impaneled and sworn, in the above entitled action, upon our oaths, do find the defendant as to count 1, first-degree murder, guilty.
Alexander appears off guard in this photo. He clearly had no idea what was coming. The last transmission of Vladimir Komarov. Venturing to space requires an incredible amount of bravery, and it's exactly because of disasters like this. Soviet cosmonaut Vladimir Komarov became the first person to die in space when his Soyuz 1 capsule failed to deploy its parachute during re-entry. Audio footage of his final transmission has been released, and it depicts an agitated Komarov yelling over a din of loud background noise with the full awareness of his impending death. A lot has been debated regarding this audio, including the translation and even the authenticity of the audio itself. But if it is real, then this is truly one of the most disturbing things found on the internet. Chris Watts. By now, everyone knows Chris Watts as the subject of Netflix's American Murder, The Family Next Door.
I have no idea who gave you the right to take their lives.
But those watching Denver 7 News on August 14, 2018 would have had no idea he was a killer. Denver 7 interviewed Watts about the disappearance of his pregnant wife and 2 young children.
But she didn't get back to her people, which was very concerning, and Nicole called me when she was at the door, and that's when I came home.
Aside from Watts' curious lack of emotion, this seems like a typical news segment about a missing person. The very next day, Watts was arrested after failing a polygraph and admitting to killing his wife Shannon.
And you have not shed one tear.
Don't look into that like I don't love my kids, I love my wife.
Explain to me.
Watts initially claimed that Shannon had ended the lives of their children and that he killed her in retaliation, but he later admitted to committing their murders as well.
I want everybody to just come home. Like, wherever they're at, come home.
The following November, Watts received 5 life sentences. The happy, creepy killer. Without any background information, the wide-eyed kid in this picture probably wouldn't strike you as very threatening. When you know the whole story, however, that innocent smile of his will quickly turn into a ghastly grin. This curly-haired 17-year-old is Jeffrey Franklin, who killed his parents and attacked his 3 siblings. Following a car chase, the authorities cornered Franklin at a dead end. The photo shows Franklin in the back of a police vehicle, not appearing especially distraught over the atrocities he's committed or his impending future behind bars. Claiming he felt like a, quote, evil being had taken over him, Franklin pled guilty and received 3 consecutive life sentences.
I don't blame anybody for the reactions to me because I feel that I justified most of them.
Tyler Hadley and the Red Solo Cup. Mere hours before raising his Red Solo Cup in this pic, 17-year-old Tyler Hadley hid his parents' cell phone and took 3 ecstasy pills. Hadley proceeded to end his mother's life with a hammer and then did the same to his father. After cleaning up the mess, Hadley shared on Facebook he was throwing a party that very night. At said party, Hadley told his best friend Michael Mandel all about his heinous actions.
After he told me, I didn't believe him because he's been my best friend forever. I would never suspect anything like this. And I was looking around. He told me if I look at enough, I can see signs. I looked on the floor, I could see signs of blood. And that's when I went around back and looked in his parents' bedroom.
Using his phone, Mandel subsequently took this picture with Hadley, knowing it would be the last time they ever saw each other. Leaving the party, Mandel hid the pills Hadley planned to commit suicide with and called Crime Stoppers. This led to Hadley's arrest and life sentence without parole.
Nearly 3 years of pain and worry now starting to slowly subside with the stroke of a gavel.
The exorcism of Anneliese Michel. In the late 1960s, a German teenager named Anneliese Michel began experiencing seizures and depression. Michel grew worse as time wore on, and she began hearing voices. By the mid-70s, Michelle's condition had not improved, and her parents turned to the Catholic Church for relief. Michelle was deemed possessed and subjected to nearly 70 exorcisms. Audio Of these exorcisms was recorded and eventually played in court, depicting a gravelly voiced Michelle making horrible noises and screaming with a ghastly howl. Unfortunately, Michelle passed away at 23 from malnutrition, as she had not been eating throughout the ordeal. Both Michelle's parents and the priests faced trial and were found guilty of manslaughter for their roles in her death. The Stephen Mark McDaniel interview. In this video, viewers can pinpoint the exact moment that murderer Stephen McDaniel realized he was going to be caught. It is incredible. and incredibly creepy.
Lauren was my neighbor. We're just trying to find out where she is at this point.
McDaniel lived next door to fellow law school student Lauren Giddings. Giddings had gone missing, and a few days after her disappearance, her dismembered torso was found covered in plastic in a trash bin outside the building where they both lived. McDaniel was not aware of this. While interviewing McDaniel about Giddings' disappearance, the reporter mentions the recent discovery of her body. The criminal completely shuts down.
I know they've been doing a lot of, I think that's where they had recovered the body or whatever they recovered from there.
Body?
His eyes glaze over, he loses his words, and it looks like he's about to faint.
Are you okay, sir?
I think I need to sit down.
Okay.
He eventually goes to sit down, and while unknowing viewers may think he's in shock, the truth is far more malicious. Goodbye, John Lennon. We're all familiar with the music of John Lennon as well as his tragic fate. Photographer Paul Gorish couldn't have predicted it at the time, but this would reportedly be the last picture anyone took of Lennon. The image seems innocent enough as the former Beatle signs his autograph for an apparent admirer. Lennon's impending demise was creeping up in the photo's corner, however. The man standing next to him is none other than Mark David Chapman, the one responsible for Lennon's untimely demise.
Hard to get to write at first. Then he wrote his name, John Lennon, and then underneath that, 1980. And he looked at me, as I mentioned earlier, he said, "Is that all? Do you want anything else?"
6 hours or so after this photo was taken, Lennon and Yoko Ono encountered Chapman again outside of their apartment building, the Dakota. With Lennon's back turned, Chapman drew his firearm, and the music world would never be the same again.
So I called the Daily News. He said to me, you think you have what? And he said, "Paul, are you sure that this is the man that you believe killed him?" And I said, "Well, that's the man named Mark from Hawaii who was waiting out there all day with the album who got the autograph."
BTK at graduation. Dennis Rader was his church's president, a Cub Scout leader, and an all-around pillar of the community. As you can tell from this photo, Rader was also a family man who seemed quite proud of his daughter Carrie at her college graduation. This would all be overshadowed, though, when Rader was exposed as the BTK Strangler, the letters standing for bind, torture, kill as his preferred MO.
When BTK came forward, everybody's life changed. He would see a woman walking and he would say, "She's next."
Over the course of multiple decades, this seemingly ordinary guy took 10 lives. In 2005, the authorities used Carrie Rader's DNA to link her father to a crime scene, culminating in his arrest.
Carrie had graduated from K-State, and while there, had tests at health services, both a pap smear and a biopsy. Investigators traveled to Manhattan with a subpoena in hand for those smears. Her DNA, a direct match to DNA left at BTK crime scenes.
Rader pled guilty and was subsequently sentenced to 10 consecutive life sentences. About 14 years after her father was captured, Carrie released a book entitled A Serial Killer's Daughter, My Story of Faith, Love, and Overcoming.
It's been like a cathartic process of having to go do really hard work and find those memories again of my father that I had lost and try to separate my dad back out as my dad and remove the BTK from it.
The Eternal Shadow. At face value, this dark outline of a person could be chalked up to some harmless graffiti. While we wish that were the case, this shadowy figure resulted from the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. In August of 1945, the US dropped 2 nuclear weapons, Little Boy and Fat Man, that resulted in anywhere between 129 and 226,000 deaths.
At 8:14, it was a sunny day. At 8:15, it was a hellscape.
Whoever this person was, it appears they were using a walking stick during their final moments when the blast hit. As a result of the bombing, an imprint of this unknown soul was left on the steps. This wasn't an isolated incident, as numerous shadows can still be found around the bombing sites, forever immortalizing those horrifying days. The Jonestown Death Tape.
Father loves all of us.
Perhaps the most disturbing bit of audio found on the internet is the Jonestown Death Tape.
We're all ready to go. If you tell us we have to give our lives now, we're ready. I'm pretty sure all the rest of the sisters and brothers are with me.
Back in 1978, Jonestown, Guyana was home to a cult known as the People's Temple.
These lovely people are all happy. None of them want to return.
They're delighted with this lovely life.
The cult was led by Jim Jones, and on November 18, 1978, 909 people died at Jonestown from cyanide poisoning.
No other way I would rather go and give my life for socialism, communism, and I thank Dad very, very much.
The event is now attributed entirely to Jones, and his victims are deemed just that. Running nearly 45 minutes in length, the tape depicts the terrifying event in full.
It's just too late. It's too late. The congressman's dead, the congress today's dead, many of our traitors are dead, they're all laying out there dead.
Listening to this is certainly not for the faint of heart, as it's a disturbing historical document that depicts one of the greatest tragedies in modern American history. Before we continue, be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. You have the option to be notified for occasional videos or all of them. If you're on your phone, make sure you go into your settings and switch on notifications. Jeffrey Dahmer Home Video. When it comes to American serial killers, it doesn't get much worse or more notorious than Jeffrey Dahmer. His very name is synonymous with serial killers, having killed 17 people from 1978 to 1991. In this home video from the early 90s, Dahmer, who had already murdered multiple people by this point, can be seen speaking to his father and nonchalantly flipping through a magazine.
Working and working and working and working. Working next week, starting Monday. I go back to work Sunday night.
They talk about Dahmer's weight and eating out at McDonald's, and Dahmer explains that he needs to start eating at home more often.
Been surviving mostly on McDonald's food. It's just so much easier just to pop into a restaurant. But yeah, like I've said before, it gets too expensive.
He just looks like a typical Midwestern male, not the most notorious serial killer in American history.
I have to start eating at home more.
The eating at home comment is also made creepier by the fact that Dahmer cannibalized many of his later victims. Which of these backstories still haunts you to this day? Let us know in the comments.
Number one, would you say hello to Cheryl, please? We're going to have a great time together, Cheryl.